When it comes to the features which make or break a firearm design, one of the most overlooked features is the magazine of that firearm. Most people think magazines are just a box containing the ammunition, but that's a clip. A magazine is a device consisting of various parts as well as geometric shapes. And when you don't design that part or that shape with proper thinking or proper quality control, there's a chance the entire firearm might suffer heavily. Oftentimes, designing a proper magazine is one of the hardest job for a gun designing team because a magazine follows much more harsh conditions compared to the gun itself. Now, firearm designers throughout the years have faced issues of creating reliable magazines, and in many cases, they have failed. For example, USGI aluminum mags are one of the main reasons the M16 series of rifles had the wrong moniker of being a Jamomatic, when in reality it is one of the most reliable rifles ever made. Similarly, a large reason the SA-80 or more particularly the L85A1 is so much infamous is because of its horrendous Radaway green magazines, especially the first batch ones, with their extremely light feed lips. Now, what is a magazine and which parts does it have? Well, a magazine is a device which feeds the ammunition it contains into the receiver of a firearm, and it has various parts, be it the follower, the magazine spring, the backplate, the feed lips, and many more. However, one particular part that is very important for the magazine's quality among all these parts is the magazine body itself. Oftentimes, magazines are built with terrible quality products which hamper the magazine's reliability as well as survivability in a combat scenario or even in day-to-day scenario. And nothing exemplifies this more than the absolutely infamous incas Neil Kamal mags. What's the Neil Kamal mag? It is the primary magazine which is built for the incas. It comes in two versions, 20 rounds for the rifle and 30 rounds for the LMG. Although both the rifle and the LMG can interchangeably take both. Now, before I say and give the reasons as to why the Nilkamal mags are the worst magazines ever to exist, I must give you about some basic info about the magazines. Now, the Nilkamal mags were parts of the incest trials and came alongside the incest. The main inspiration was the polymer magazines of the SIG SG 550. The incest design was designed during late 1970s up to early 1980s, and many guns of that particular era was transitioning to the new hot shot in the town, the translucent polymer magazine. Most notable among them were the Star AUG and the Swiss SIG SG 550 series of rifles. Now, the Steyr AUG magazine won't win any awards, but it's reliable, and the SIG 550 magazine is basically Swiss in quality, so it's perfect. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. Sadly, India isn't Switzerland, and we didn't have the best expertise on how to create a magazine. In fact, we had no expertise. So, basically, a modified version of the SIG magazine was meant to be created because that was the 20 rounder the Indian doctrine was going for. Now, this was the first time the Indian defense establishment decided to give a contract to a private vendor, the Nilkamal Incorporation, known widely back then and even now for making those ubiquitous plastic chairs you find in practically every public hall and place everywhere. This is one of those things that you never know from which country it has come from, right? Now, what Nilkamal excelled at was creating chairs for the large market in scale. What Nilkamal had absolutely no about idea about was how to make a proper gun magazine. They have never done it. So they chose this particular resin called ebonite. Basically, the same ingredient they use for making the chairs. And this is where everything went horribly wrong. Ebonite is a resin that is decent enough for making chairs, but it is not right for making a magazine because it tends to crack horribly in cold, and it's quite a brittle. And adding to that, the heat treatment of the magazine body was bad, as well as the spring metal used in the magazine follower was also not very good. This meant that despite it being a 20 rounder, for most part, an Indian soldier would carry at barely 16 or 18 rounds in his magazine, because 20 rounds would drastically reduce the magazine survivability or magazine life. Now, because India back in the 1980s was going through one of its worst period with horrible financial situation as well as rampant increase in many separatist movements, many of them violent, the Indian soldier of the 1980s was not able to get a bulletproof jacket. So, how to increase the survivability? The Indian MOD thought that the proper answer to that would be speed. The Indian soldier needed to be high speed, low drag. And the way they chose from the Indian soldier to achieve that is by giving him a horribly low amount of ammunition. An Indian soldier would carry an INSAS with a 20 rounder, three spare mags, and two 30 rounders for the section LMG. That is the INSAS LMG, basically Indian variant of the RPK. So even the most well filled up Indian loadout would be at most 60 plus 80, a meager 140 rounds, which was wholly inadequate. And to add to this already terrible situation, the practice of the Indian military was and is to this day, as far as I know, I don't know if they have changed it recent time or not, is that the soldier would be charged for damaging his equipment. So if one of those magazines, this horribly inadequate and brittle uh, piece of shit magazine, would get damaged, the soldier has to pay for it from his own income, his own salary. So the incest mags were hated by the Indian soldiers. In many cases, they were more scared of damaging those magazines than they were scared of getting shot at. During the tenure at Sierra Leone, uh, I know a Air Force veteran who was carrying his incest mags in his trouser pockets instead of the gear, instead of his chest rig, the Indian chest rig, which was based partially on the American Alice gear. So another horrible equipment in itself. And he would refuse to carry those mags in that rig because if he would have dived head first, which was very much the standard doctrine when you are being ambushed, the magazines might get broken when it slams in the ground. So, aside from being almost a death sentence, if that happens during an ambush, that would result in heavy penalties for him when the whole ordeal is over. So the incest mags were absolutely terrible. And this is why when India finally created the Excalibur, which is the third generation of incest, the milled receiver one, they didn't go for the translucent ebonite mags or the Nilkamal mags anymore. They went back to polymer but completely black and long ribbed magazine. They are heavier, yes. The Nilkamal mags are absolutely featherweight. In fact, if India would have gone the original vision of Eugene Stoner and created a mag that was supposed to be use and throw, then maybe the Ebonite mags would be a much better fit. But instead, we got this. So, nonetheless, the Excalibur has a standard issue black magazine, which is far better, far better than the Nilkamal Ebonite transparent mags. And the new 5.56 rifles, the CQB carbine that DRDO is making, will also not feature a translucent magazine anymore. Furthermore, nowadays India has seen the PMAGs at work, and they are working on copying the features of magazines like those. So the future Indian soldier doesn't have to think twice before diving to the ground to damage his magazine. Anyways, that's it. Good day after everyone. Happy New Year 2026. Wish you all great prosperity ahead. Signing off.